This is a 1995 BMW M3 GT, and it is a truly special car. A lot of people consider this to be the ultimate version of the E36 BMW M3 in the 1990s, with factory performance upgrades, a special color, and extremely limited production. And today I'm going to review this E36 M3 GT and explain it all, and show you all of its quirks and features. Before I get started, big news, this E36 M3 GT is currently for sale, and it's being auctioned live on Cars and Bids. This M3 GT is one of just over 350 units for the entire world, and it's being offered by world-famous Enthusiast Auto Group, and you can buy it on Cars and Bids. So, once you finish watching this video, click the link in the description below to visit the live auction for this E36 M3 GT, where you can bid on it and buy it only on Cars and Bids. Alright, time for the quirks and features of the E36 M3 GT, which is considered by many BMW M enthusiasts to be the ultimate version of the E36 M3, an iconic BMW M car. And I'm going to start with what makes this car so special. So, BMW built only 356 units of the E36 M3 GT. That's for the entire planet. It's tremendously rare. And this car was built as a homologation car for a German racing series, meaning in order to go racing with the car, they had to build a certain number of production cars in order to qualify to be able to race the car. Now, because the racing series was in Germany, BMW didn't need to homologate the car globally, and so the E36 M3 GT was only ever sold in Europe, which is why some American viewers might not be familiar with this car. We never got it here in the US. And that's a shame, because this car is really, really cool. So, what makes it so special? Well, like I said, 356 units for the world, also only for the 1995 model year. They didn't make it after that. Also, every E36 M3 GT was painted this unusual color, British racing green. You can see it on the outside. It's very distinctive, and you can see the little color plaque right here that mentions the color name individual British racing green. And then there were the performance upgrades. Like other Euro E36 M3s, this one has the Euro engine. The US E36 M3 had 240 horsepower. The Euro cars had about 280 horsepower, but the M3 GT had a higher compression ratio, kicked things up to about 295 horsepower. So it was a boost over the US car and even a boost over the regular 95 Euro E36 M3. But it wasn't just the extra horsepower that made this car more special. There were a lot of other upgrades too. You can see one of them up front. This car has an extended front splitter for better aero, and it's adjustable so you can tune it for your specific track performance. Speaking of aero, that wing in back, it's huge and it's stock. Only offered on the M3 GT, this double height wing, body color in British racing green, as you can see, and again adjustable so you can configure it to your exact specifications. Also on the outside, you had special wheels in the M3 GT, as you can see. These have a similar look to other E36 M3 wheels, but this particular precise design and finish was unique to the M3 GT. The GT also had stiffer suspension for a harsher ride but better handling performance, and added chassis bracing, as you can see under the hood. For example, this chassis brace here with the M logo on it helped make the car feel tighter, and there was more beyond just that. This car was also all about weight savings, and they shaved a few pounds off here and there, but the most noticeable weight savings change over the regular M3 is the doors. This one has aluminum doors. It's hard to really demonstrate that on camera, but they are very light. And if you look at these rivets here, I guess the regular standard M3 doors don't have those, but the aluminum rivets are only on this car's aluminum doors. Overall, BMW saved about 66 pounds on the M3 GT compared to the standard model. And there were more changes inside, the most obvious of which is the green seats. You can can see green leather seats in this car. The seat center's green leather to match the green exterior on all the M3 GTs. That is certainly an unusual look, and it was carried over to the door panels. Green leather to match the green seats and the green exterior. Certainly interesting and special for this car. Now, you can also see Alcantara on the seats as well, sort of a sporty seat theme in this car. Alcantara wasn't in wide use when this car was made, so that was pretty special in addition to the green seats. Other upgrades in this car, for one, the steering wheel. You had a more sporty, aggressive steering wheel in the M3 GT compared to the standard E36 M3 of its day. And you also have carbon fiber trim in here. You can see all in the center console. This carbon fiber trim helps the car look sportier, obviously. And over on the passenger side of the dashboard, a little extra carbon fiber trim, and you have a little plaque there. BMW Motorsport International Limited Edition. It's not a numbered car, but we know just how limited it is. You also have a special plaque on the door sill. As you can see, when you open the door, it's there. You can't see it when the car is moving, but it's a cool touch when you climb inside. And there's even a special plaque on the outside of the door, right here. Kind of odd placement because it's so tiny. You have to be right next to the car to read it. It's not a badge someone could see in traffic, but it's there, signifying just how special this car is. Now, one interesting thing about that exterior plaque, it's the only real badging telling you about the GT. This car doesn't have an M3 GT badge in back, as you can see. Instead, just the standard M3 badge. But with the green color, the double height wing, the front splitter, they probably figured that was enough. They didn't really need to badge it because people who know would know instantly. So those are most of the M3 GT upgrades. Beyond that, let's talk through some regular E36 M3 Quirks, which are always wonderful and interesting. Probably my favorite is the shifter, which is lighted on top. You have the shift pattern and the M logo here, but in the dark, when you turn on the headlights, obviously all the buttons in the interior light up and the top of the shifter lights up too. This was a BMW M car touch in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and I love it, and it is so cool to see. One other nice touch that I love from BMWs in this era is this central climate vent, which is giant and weirdly sculpted and shaped and twisted towards the driver on this giant center console that's twisted toward the driver. It gives you sort of a cockpit feel that was not common in cars of this era, but BMWs were all about the driver, the ultimate driving machine, and so that climate vent tried to signify that. Now, also in the center, another interesting item here is the heated seat switch. You can see here heated left or right seats, which was also a nice feature to have 30 years ago, especially in a performance car. And you can choose between 3 bacon heated seats or 1 bacon heated seat. That's your choice between high or low. Now, also here in the center, you can see there's a little screen with some display readouts. And I consider this to be one of the forefathers of the modern infotainment system. It doesn't give you much info, but it does tell you the exterior temperature, your average speed, your range until the fuel runs out, and various other things. There's even a timer that you can turn on and it'll keep time. And of course, it's all right here in the center where the infotainment system now is. This little rudimentary piece kind of expanded into what is now the modern day full screen infotainment. Now, one thing I love about this, there's a button to instantly switch between kilometers and miles. So like if you're looking at fuel range, you can switch instantly, but that button will also instantly switch between Fahrenheit and Celsius when you're on temperature, which I think is wonderful because it's not labeled as such, but it has the same basic function, and everybody would understand why they did it that way, even if the function isn't actually printed on the button. It makes sense. Unless, of course, you're in the UK where you're switching between miles and Celsius, and you got to be pressing it all the time, but that's for British people to figure out. One other interesting screen situation in this car, when you turn on an E36 M3, you're greeted by this bizarre line of green dots, and then there's a yellow and a red. That was for your service intervals. When you had the car serviced at a BMW dealership, they would reset it and it would fully turn green. And then as you drove, the green dots would kind of go away and then become yellow and red, indicating that it was time time for another service. Another kind of precursor to some modern infotainment technology in the gauge cluster here. Other interesting quirks in this car, well, the rear view mirrors are an obvious one. They are tremendously small. They were supposed to be like sculpted for aerodynamics, but the result was that you couldn't see anything. These aren't unique to the M3 GT. They were on other E36 M3 models, and they never really provided visibility. Moving back inside, one other nice thing that's cool is the thigh support in the seats. You can see this little panel sort of sticks out beyond the seat, which is nice, but you can even stick it out further. There's a little latch under it. You can move it forward and get even extra thigh support, which is nice to see for tall drivers. And speaking of support and comfort, there is an armrest in this car. You can fold it down into place and rest your arm, and it's finished in Alcantara too, just like the outside of the seats, which again was a pretty cool feature back in the day. Although driving this car with the manual transmission, most of the time you would keep that armrest folded up so your elbow doesn't bang into it. Still pretty cool to see it there. Now, as for the back seats, you can see it's a pretty no-frills experience in back. Not much going on back there, but you do have the same green leather seats as you do up front with the same Alcantara seat centers. It all looks pretty cool, and even the little M colors stitched into sort of a corner in the leather in the seat center. They spared no expense in making sure the interior of this car was as green as possible, front and rear. Other interesting things in back, for one, the seat belts come out of the center rather than out of the sides, which was an E36 M3 hallmark, a little bit unorthodox, but that's how these cars were. Also, the rear windows, they don't open down. They're not like power sliding windows, but they do vent open, as you can see. So you do have a little bit of fresh air here, which, given BMW in the mid-90s, was probably intended for people who wanted to put cigarette ash out the window. And finally, we move on to the back, the trunk of the M3 GT. Open it up with a little push button here. It's actually pretty heavy because of the big rear wing. But once you have it open, you can see that the trunk is, well, fairly standard. It's actually surprisingly large considering the size of this car, but there's nothing particularly unusual or exciting within the trunk area. Although I love in this car, and I've always loved in BMWs from this era, the toolkit that's on the inside of the trunk lid. You can see it here. There's even a little E34 5 Series rescue car on it. But anyway, you twist this little twisty, and then the toolkit kind of pops open and is designed to lay perfectly flat when you have the trunk open, so you have easy access to your tools in case you need to change a tire or fix something on the roadside. That's a pretty nifty little feature. Of course, when you're done, you just fold it back up, twist it locked, and your toolkit remains with you in the trunk always. But you're probably more interested in how this car drives. I know I am very curious to check out the ultimate E36 M3, so time to get behind the wheel. All right, driving the E36 M3 GT. Now, this is especially interesting for me because I am a former E36 M3 owner. Not that many people know this about me. I had an E36 M3 before I started with YouTube or anything of that variety, but I owned it, bought it personally, just owned it and enjoyed it for about a year. I had a 98 M3 manual transmission sedan. This car is on a completely different level from that. It's just cooler. The other thing I noticed right away about this car compared to my old E36 M3 is it's just tighter. Everything feels tighter. The clutch is a little bit heavier, but also a little bit easier to use in the sense that the bite point and the whole motion is just tighter and easier. The shifter and shift lever situation feels better. I don't think this car comes with a shorter throw shifter, but it's probably just been maintained and kept better because it's a GT as opposed to my old M3. One thing that is clearly tighter is acceleration pedal response. Obviously, this car has more power than a US spec E36 M3, and boy does it feel it. You really have an instantaneous throttle response in a way that you just didn't get with the US E36 M3s. I mean, say what you will about the US E36 M3s, but they're pretty slow. They really are. From a factory perspective, OE, they're pretty slow cars. This one is not slow. This has an extra 50 horsepower over the E36 M3 in the US, and it's just not that big of a car for 300 horsepower, especially considering you're rowing your own, and it just feels like you have a great responsiveness to it. Love the exhaust sound. Steering is a little vaguer than I was expecting, similar to my old E36 M3. It's kind of funny, the 90s, it's 30 years ago. I mean, steering has changed a lot, and this car was always lauded for its handling. It got tons of accolades that it deserved in the time period, no question. Certainly handles a lot better than my Audi RS2, which I owned, that was a 94 model. This is only a 95 and feels like it's on a different level in a different league. But it's still not a modern car, at least in terms of steering. It's quick and it's sporty and it handles well because of its small size and lightweight, which modern cars can't really match. But the steering feel specifically, you're always going to lose a little bit of it. This was sort of, I wouldn't call it the early days of power steering, but automakers were they definitely hadn't gotten the formula down yet. And cars today, the steering precision is just so much better. However, going around hard corners in this car, it is amazing how quick the car handles. The body roll is very, very minimal, even at 160,000 kilometers, and the handling is just quite impressive. The car stays planted, it's relatively quick to respond because of its small size, and as long as you give it some decent steering input, more than you'd have to in a modern car, it does what you want it to do. It just maybe takes a little bit more turn of the wheel to get there and do it. Ride quality is harsh, but definitely not punishing. It is not like a GT3 quality situation, but I would say it's more punishing than a regular E36 M3 for sure. It's definitely harsher. It has stiffer suspension. That was one of the benefits of the car, and you can certainly feel it. But again, you can drive it. Like it's not punishing. It's not too difficult. Easy to rev match because it revs quickly, and you can hear it very well. There's a lot to like about this car. Oh, man. It feels just planted and just ready to rock and roll around corners, and it really is. This is an impressive driving experience, truthfully. I tell you, I really like the regular E36 M3. I like the E30 M3. I like a lot of the M cars from this era. This E36 M3 GT has the reputation for being kind of the ultimate E36 vehicle, and it is. It just is. It just feels tight, it drives well, it looks cool, it handles better. And then there's some improvements, you know, in the interior, the steering wheel, the seats are green and cool, the dash black, the carbon trim. This car has the cosmetic stuff, it has the rarity, and it has the driving experience. And, you know, if you're an M3 Evo owner, an E30 M3 Evo owner, and you want to add something to the collection, this is sort of the next step of that car, and boy is it engaging. I'm actually surprised at just how engaging it is. It doesn't quite have the precision of modern cars, but it gains a lot in terms of its smaller size, its tossability, and for me, that's what I like. And I think a 300 horsepower manual tossable little car is just a perfect thing. It's why I love the 993 911, and I really like this car. And so that's the 1995 BMW M3 GT, the E36 M3 GT. This is a truly special car with some fantastic upgrades over the standard E36 M3, which itself was a pretty special car. And any BMW M enthusiast will consider this one of the holy grail M cars. I'm thrilled I had the chance to review it, and you can buy it on Cars and Bids. Anyway, now it's time to give the E36 M3 GT a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 54 out of 100, which puts the E36 M3 GT here against some close rivals. It ties the Euro E36 M3 I reviewed a couple of years ago, and both cars really are impressive given their age. Fast, fun, and surprisingly sharp, even after some decades have gone by. The M3 GT is cooler, but very subtle. But both cars would be a thrill to drive hard on some back roads or to a BMW meet.